It's really a pleasure for me to be able to be here, to be back in British Columbia. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the ancestral territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. It really is an honor for me to stand before all of you today to talk about an important issue for both of our provinces. For more than a century, the Vancouver Board of Trade has helped this region and, quite frankly, all of Western Canada grow and prosper. And I'm hopeful that today we can continue that good work on behalf of the people and the families of BC and Alberta alike. And so today I'd like to speak to you about the twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And specifically, I want to make the progressive case for why this pipeline must be built. This includes the real benefits of this pipeline to working people on both sides of our borders and across the country. It includes the most comprehensive climate action plan in all of North America. And it includes meaningful responses to the real concerns of people and families here in BC, something that I'm going to need all of you to help spread the word about. Because, in my view, making sure that people in BC know the facts about the pipeline and about Alberta's climate leadership matters to me, and it matters to the people who I represent back home. Now, as many of you might know, I did actually live in BC for many years. This is where I was married. It's where I had both of my children. And in fact, for many years, we lived just off of Commercial Drive. And it's where I first met your new Premier, John Horgan. John and I were both staffers in the legislature in Victoria in the mid-90s, working for the Clark government. Those were interesting times. I learned a lot working with John, although, thankfully, I was spared the lacrosse lessons. And it's possible that he maybe learned a few things from me as well. But what all eager young staffers do learn with time is that government is about serving people. And I know that both of our respective governments actually share that very basic philosophy. And whatever our differences, and we do have a big one, we were definitely elected to make life better for everyday families. Jobs, affordability, a clean environment, good public schools, good public health care. These are the things that matter to Albertans and to my government, and I know that they matter to British Columbians and to John's government as well. And that's not really surprising, because BC and Alberta share very, very deep ties. Our economies are linked, and so are our cultures. Over the holidays, there will be families traveling from BC to visit their loved ones in Alberta and families from Alberta who will be visiting their loved ones here. And we also share the desire for good jobs, a clean environment, and opportunities for our kids and our grandkids. Our good fortune is your good fortune, and vice versa. In part because for decades, our oil sands have helped people from across Canada build better lives, pay taxes, and build stronger communities in their home provinces. Here in BC, for example, in 2014, 44,000 people who lived and paid taxes in British Columbia actually earned their paychecks working in Alberta. They earned more than $2 billion, most of which I suspect was spent supporting the local economy. So when the oil price dropped from well over $100 a barrel to under $30 a barrel inside of a year, the effect was felt well beyond Alberta's borders. It was felt in homes and communities from coast to coast to coast. And those aren't just numbers. I mean, they're big numbers, but they're not just numbers. What they actually are is real people and their families, working people who rely on a strong energy industry to put food on the table, to take care of their families, and to put something away for their retirement. That's who that was about. And those are also working people who contribute mightily to the health and the well-being of the programs and the services that all Canadians across this country rely on. Now, we all share an interesting feature, Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, in that we are all net fiscal contributors to the Canadian Federation. On a per capita basis, folks in Saskatchewan contribute $554 per year to the country on a per capita basis, more than what is received back. In Ontario, that number is an average of $650 per person. Here in British Columbia, it's an average of $886 per person. And in Alberta, every woman, man, and child contributes an average of $5,148 per person to our country, 6 times more. All in, Alberta contributes $22 billion per year more to Ottawa than we receive in return, even after the effects of the recession arising from the downturn. Now, I raise this only to say that Alberta's energy industry is a dominant part of what makes Canada tick. And the working people of Alberta work very hard to make sure that all Canadians benefit from being part of this great country. And you may have heard me say this before, but it bears repeating. There is not a school, there is not a hospital, there is not a bus, a road, a bike lane, or a port that doesn't owe something to the strong energy industry in the province of Alberta. So I think, in fact I trust, that we can all agree that Alberta's energy industry is a vital part of what makes Canada great. And with that as our starting point, I'd like to have a bit of a conversation with British Columbians, and that's why I'm here today. And to begin with, I want to tell you what I'm not going to do. Now, there are some people, mostly back home, who are urging me to yell and to scream and to shake my fist and generally have a temper tantrum. And I am not here to do that. Although I will grant you it might make good TV, sorry. First and foremost, though, the reason I won't be doing that is because I don't believe that we can build a strong Canada by building walls. Quite frankly, divisive tactics just won't get us anywhere. We are one country, and we need to listen to each other. Secondly, as you heard about this morning, our national government has made a decision in the national interest, as it should. And therefore, I believe this conversation is among Canadian citizens with shared bonds. What unites us is stronger than that which divides us, and we must always try to find common ground. And with that in mind, I also believe that the extraordinary steps that your fellow citizens in Alberta have taken to tackle climate change and to support working people speak to the larger national purpose that we all care about. One that brings Albertans and British Columbians and all Canadians together around a number of shared national aims, including the desire to protect our climate. And so I'd like to take just a moment to tell you a little bit about our work in that area, about our climate leadership plan. For too long in Alberta, governments ignored climate change and the threats that it presented. They crossed their arms, they turned their backs, and they yelled at anyone who challenged them on the issue. And quite frankly, in my view, it didn't get Alberta very far. And so when my government was elected a little over 2 years ago, we fundamentally changed our approach. Instead of pointing fingers, instead of shouting, we brought people together. Environmentalists, energy companies, workers. And we developed a Made in Alberta plan that is the most aggressive and comprehensive response to climate change anywhere in North America. In many ways, in parts of it, we took inspiration from BC, one of North America's first jurisdictions to bring in an economy-wide price on carbon. But I will suggest that I think we went a bit further. And here's what our plan does. Let me tell you just a little bit about it. First of all, we are phasing out coal pollution by 2030. And to understand that, not only does coal currently account for 60% of Alberta's electricity production and generation, Alberta burns more coal than the rest of the country combined. So we are replacing it, bringing in more renewables and more clean burning natural gas. And when we are done, we will have made good on one of the most dramatic clean energy conversions anywhere in the world. Something that will go a very long way to helping our country meet, as a nation, our international climate change commitments. And as a result as well, Alberta is now one of North America's hottest renewable energy markets. Jobs are being created, investors are lining up for it, our post-secondary schools are ramping up their training programs, and the air we breathe will be cleaner and healthier as a result. Our government has also implemented world-leading energy efficiency programs. We went from having no energy efficiency plan at all in the province of Alberta to having one of the most ambitious ones in the country. Since the spring of this year, just for example, over 150,000 households have signed up to get free energy efficiency products installed in their homes. Those installations alone will reduce more than 50,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And that work is only beginning. We're also working very closely with our partners in the energy industry to reduce harmful methane emissions. And another thing that we are doing, as some of you may know, you may have heard about it a bit today, but many, many people do not know. A central pillar of our climate leadership plan saw us legislate a hard cap on emissions from the oil sands. A hard cap. And this measure is absolutely critical. It was developed in lockstep together with leading producers and job creators in our oil sands, people who are dedicated to being part of the solution. And I want to pause here to reflect on the ambition and the scope of these changes. Alberta's energy industry, its workers, the communities that rely on the oil sands and the oil and gas industry, frankly, they took a very giant step forward. And they did it, and we did it, in the midst of a punishing economic recession. It wasn't, and it isn't easy. But Albertans took this step because as Canada's largest energy producer, we know that we have a unique responsibility to tackle climate change. And we know that any climate action plan that doesn't include Alberta, frankly, is not a plan. It won't work. And we all want and must do right by future generations. We all know that in our heart. We all knew we had to do this. And though some would argue that we can build our energy industry for the future and ignore climate change, we all knew that it was a fantasy. And so I am proud of the fact that by capping these emissions, the Trans Mountain Pipeline does not contribute to climate change. And this is really very important for all Canadians to understand. And because as I have learned, I can't say it enough. I really thought, I'd send it a couple times when we first did it and everybody got it and that was cool, but no, that's not what's happened. We have to say it a lot. So I want to place special emphasis on it here in BC. Let me be absolutely clear that Trans Mountain Pipeline will not increase GHG emissions from Alberta's oil sands. And those who say otherwise are just playing politics, and they are playing politics with the jobs and the livelihoods of working people. The only thing that pipeline will increase is prosperity for all Canadians and jobs for many. So let me turn for a moment to that point. One of the single biggest challenges that we face in the pursuit of prosperity and in the pursuit of those jobs for many is the challenge of market access. You don't need to be in business to know that relying on one customer at one price is not actually a good strategy in the short or the long term. But really that's what's going on within our energy industry in Canada. Right now, as you know, many of you know, some of you won't, Canadians can only sell their oil products to one customer, the US. And that means that we take a big discount on every barrel of oil as well. So today, WTI is hovering just a little below $58 a barrel. And WCS, Western Canadian Select, that which we get for it, is around $40 a barrel. Now, a big price of that differential is due to our restricted markets, or a big part of it, of that price differential, is due to our restricted markets, and due to the fact that our resources are sometimes being transported increasingly by rail. The more rail we use, the bigger the differential gets, and the bigger the differential gets, the more money we as Canadians leave on the table. In other words, countries like Russia, which don't care about climate change, can get full value for their products on world markets, but Canadians cannot. That's less money for healthcare, less money for education, and less money to grow our renewable sector and ultimately to reduce our emissions overall throughout the economy. The U.S. has also tripled its own energy production over the past decade and built numerous pipelines while we in Canada were arguing over ours. So the Americans are now has been Canada's sole customer, and of course they're now emerging as our principal competitor. And like many other countries in the world, Canada has good reason to be concerned about being overly dependent on the U.S. for our prosperity and our stability. If I could put this as politely as possible, stability is not actually the hallmark of the current political scene in the U.S. And it's not clear that our interests or concerns factor in one bit to the political debate in the U.S. The central charter of our economic relationship with the U.S., NAFTA, has been directly challenged by the new U.S. administration. So both the long-term trends in the North American energy industry and the recent political developments in the U.S. urge us to diversify our markets as quickly as possible. And that being so, to be economically safer and more secure, to be more resilient in the face of the inevitable ups and downs of the energy market, we must develop new markets and new customers for the energy we will produce within the strong climate change policies that we have all adapted and which I've just outlined. So that's what Alberta is offering right now to our country. Greater economic security and a real plan to address climate change. But these two must go hand in hand. Simply put, Alberta and Canada cannot be a climate change leader if our economy is put in a straitjacket, locked into selling to one customer. It just doesn't make any sense, and it needs to change. And to do this, we need to build a Canadian pipeline to a Canadian tidewater. And that means we have to trade through this region, Canada's gateway to the Pacific, a gateway for trade that is critically important to a national economy where 20% of our exports come from oil and gas. The twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline achieves this goal. Now, of course, access through Canada's West Coast port means access to British Columbia's coast. Every year, thousands of commercial ships travel through this region safely and reliably, adding tens of billions of dollars to our national economy. Vancouver is one of the world's great port cities. And in the Lower Mainland, you are world leaders promoting trade while protecting marine ecosystems. In fact, right now, interestingly, a new 14-kilometer pipeline has been proposed to move fuel from the Fraser River to the Vancouver International Airport. I'm sure many of you know. A pipeline that I should say is carrying fuel from the U.S. and Asia, not Canada. I'm not going to dwell on this point for a long time, but I will say I hope you can understand why that decision fuels some cynicism and frustration in Alberta. I mean, come on. Your Canadian neighbors provide energy that benefits all Canadians. If we can build pipelines that move U.S. and Asian energy products around the Lower Mainland, surely we can build them to move Canadian products that benefit all Canadians. But what are the merits of that decision? You are able to build these pipelines because you also know what it takes to protect our coast. And that's how world-class port cities operate. You set the standard. And as the NDP Premier of Alberta, someone who is working to combine a commitment to climate action with support for working people, I passionately believe that the twinning of the Trans Mountain Pipeline meets the high economic and environmental tests that we expect and demand from it. I'm proud of the fact that the Trans Mountain project also means a $1.5 billion federal government investment in coastal and marine safety. The new world-class coastal protection plan means that everything being shipped along the coast, everything, be it coal, chemicals, or cars, is safer. I know this has been something that the port and the people of Vancouver have been seeking for a very, very long time. But those new measures would not have happened were it not for this pipeline project. And let me say on this point that there is a persistent narrative that the Trans Mountain Pipeline will lead to a massive increase in tanker traffic. That is also simply not true. When completed, tanker traffic will represent less than 7% of vessel traffic through the Salish Sea. I'm proud as well of the fact that Indigenous communities in Alberta and in BC share in the economic benefits of this project. And I'm also very proud of the fact that the new pipeline will take energy products off the railroads and into modern, well-regulated, well-designed, and closely supervised pipelines. In doing so, it will create good jobs across this province, jobs in places like Hope, where $308 million will be spent during construction, in Kamloops, where hundreds of thousands of dollars will be invested in local projects through community benefit agreements. In Chilliwack, that is home to many businesses that supply services and products to energy companies in Alberta, and in Burnaby, where Trans Mountain is one of the city's largest taxpayers. In short, I would not be standing before you today if I did not believe that the Trans Mountain Pipeline contributed to a better Canada. A Canada where we get a fair return for our most valuable resources. A Canada where we take climate change seriously and back it up with meaningful action. And a Canada where we advance equality and we support working people, not just those at the top. So let me reiterate. Building new pipelines such as the Trans Mountain to open up new markets underwrites the Canadian government's ability to support the funding of hospitals for our loved ones across this country, for schools for our kids across this country, and everything that goes into strengthening our national purpose. It is, in fact, a national endeavor. Getting better prices for more buyers will be good for the jobs of tens of thousands of ordinary working Canadians, including working people here in BC. Pipelines are safer than what we are doing now. Getting pipelines built will give Canada a safer, less risky energy infrastructure. And getting better prices from more buyers will not come at the expense of increased emissions, thanks to the climate leadership plan that we introduced in Alberta, the strongest plan of its kind in the country. So, my friends, despite the polarized nature of our politics, I submit to you that most Canadians and most British Columbians support these goals. Most Canadians in each and every province of this country support the moderate, progressive approach that I've outlined today. Most Canadians understand that we have one national government to make final decisions about our one integrated, mutually dependent, and mutually sharing national economy. And for that I say, thank goodness. But we, the moderate progressive majority in Canada, we risk being a little outshouted. So as the Premier of Alberta, a province that contributes mightily to the economic well-being of our country and leads Canada on climate action, I carry this message to you and to every Canadian. If you care about the climate, if you care about jobs and working people, if you care about building a society where everybody matters, and if you care about building a national economy that can compete and win in the global marketplace, and if you care about all of these things like I do and still want to stop Alberta from diversifying our markets, then please listen. Listen to what your fellow citizens, your neighbors, your family members, and your friends in Alberta are saying. The world can either buy its oil from Alberta, a province that has taken some of the boldest steps anywhere in the world to tackle climate change, or it can buy it from places with runaway emissions. We can get a fair return for our most valuable commodity produced under a hard emissions cap and invest that money to build a better society, or we can turn back the clock. And make no mistake, Alberta cannot fund the transition to a greener, lower carbon future if our economy is held hostage by geography. We can ship our energy products in the safest way possible, or we can ship them by rail, driving up emissions and costs. We can prove to the world that you can support working people and tackle the planet's most pressing problem. Or we can choose one over the other and fail on both. Friends, that is what Alberta is saying. That is what we are asking you to hear. Not as competitors, but as fellow citizens of a great country who are on a common journey with a shared future. Because in an uncertain world, Albertans, British Columbians, and Canadians are all in this together. We can either shape that future together as one nation with shared aspirations, or we can develop into competing economic fiefdoms fighting for ever-diminishing economic returns. Canadians only in name. And I'm hoping that you listen to me at this event today are part of that moderate majority in Canada who want to see a progressive plan. If you are, now is the time to speak up. It's time to tell governments that we have the right climate leadership plan and that it should be implemented. And it's time to tell governments that we have made the right decisions about energy infrastructure, and it's time to implement those decisions too. It's time to respect those decisions and get the safe, modern energy infrastructure we need built, and built now. I'm here today to ask for your support as engaged citizens and as members of Canada's balanced, moderate, progressive majority. We can do this. We can act on climate change. We can build a prosperous economy with good jobs for working families. We can have a functioning national economy that is capable of making decisions. We can step back from extreme positions and find solutions together, like the one I've been talking about today. You can help make it happen. Please do. The time to speak up is now. Thank you all very much for this opportunity.